Hello and welcome to Sketch Together. My name is Pablo Stanley, and this is part of a crash course on Principle for Mac. Principle is a great tool for creating UI interactions and prototypes and animations. On this session, we're going to learn how to create simple page scrolling using drivers. Just a simple walkthrough. And it's going to look pretty cool. I know you're going to love this. Let's go ahead and do it. So here I have a sketch file, and on the sketch file I have two artboards, one where the walkthrough is happening, and also just a success screen for when you tap on this button. So here I have the content of the walkthrough, all the different screens, but let me show you, let me put it outside the artboard so you can actually see it. So as you can see, there are three icons, one heart, chicken, and a skull. Let me change the color of the skull so you can see it. There you go. So these are obviously outside the artboard, and I also have a spacer layer, and this spacer layer is pretty much the size of the artboard multiplied by 3. That way, that when you are using page scrolling, you have a layer that tricks the principle into aligning everything on the center using that size of the spacer. So let's go ahead and open Principle and import all of this. I'm going to create a new document on Principle, and I'm going to press the import button. And yeah, automatically it tells me to import this. And I'm going to move this outside. I'm going to make Principle big. And here, as you can see, I have all the elements. I have the chicken, the heart, and the skull. So let's go ahead and on this group, I'm going to add scrolling horizontal, and I'm going to do page, and that way it will snap to the size of the screen. So let's go ahead and just test this. So here, as you can see, it's trying to, now it's scrollable, but it doesn't go all the way to the left, and that's because it's the size of this has to be the size of the actual artboard. So let's go ahead and try it again, and as you can see, it snaps once it takes the it's close enough to the next size of the page. Perfect. So now we have that, and that's pretty basic, but you want to do more. You want to be able to control the opacity of the dots and the appearance of this button with when you're scrolling. So to do that, you're going to use drivers. And here in drivers, since we added a scrolling to this, now we can start editing layers with when you're scrolling. And here in the drivers, it looks like it's a timeline, like if you were controlling time, but actually what you're controlling is you're controlling different elements with the scrolling. So here, for example, is the scroll on the X position of this element. When you're moving it, you can start adding keyframes of different elements that change. So the first thing that I want to do is change the opacity of the dots. So dot 1 starts at 100%, and then all these move to 40%. So here, I'm going to add around, when it's around here, it's 320, I think, or 375. I'm going to change the opacity of, I'm going to add a keyframe I'm going to select all of these dots. I'm going to add a keyframe here of opacity. And then I'm going to add another keyframe here on 0. Just pressing there. And then over here, I'm going to change the opacity of dot 1 to 40%, from 100 to 40%. And then dot 2, I'm going to change the opacity from 40 to 100%. And now, when the layers are being scrolled, the opacity of the dots are changing with the scrolling on the X position. Now I'm going to add another keyframe all the way here when the skull is in the middle. And here I'm going to I'm going to add keyframes again. And then dot 3 is going to change to 100% from 40. And then dot 2 is going to change back to 40%. There you go. So now I have all the dots changing the opacity according to the position of the scrolling. So let's test it out. So as you can see, when I move this controls the different opacity of the dots down there, because I'm using drivers, and I'm using, depending on the X position of this element, the properties of this will change. Let's start changing other elements. So for example, now I want the button to appear only when the skull appears. So what I can do is I'm going to the button, I'm going to add a keyframe to the Y position. And then I'm going to add another keyframe around here, another keyframe. And then from here, it's going to move from all the way here, and then it moves here when it appears. So let's go ahead and test it. So as you can see, the button doesn't appear until the X position of the draggable content is around there. Perfect. So that's it. And now I want to get a little bit crazy with the elements. The elements, the heart, the chicken, and the skull. I want also them to grow and appear on screen. So for example, I'm going to show you, I'm going to go ahead and here on these elements, I'm going to add keyframes to the opacity right there. And then I'm going to also add keyframes to the scale. So they grow when they appear on screen. So I'm going to move all of this. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. There you go. And now let me zoom in so we can see the contents. And now, so from over here, these two elements start with a scale of, let's go to 0.2. And then also the opacity of, let's say, from 30% or 40%, just as the dots. There you go. So now I'm going to add another keyframe around here in the middle, and then I'm going to change the heart, the scale. I'm going to change it to 0.2, just as the other ones, and then I'm going to change the opacity to 40%. And then the chicken, now it grows to the scale of 1, and also the opacity goes all the way to 100%. And then this little guy, when it's here, the skull, I want to change the scale to 1 and also the opacity to 100. But I'm going to change the keyframes of these to start around here instead of all the way in the beginning. That way the keyframes start from here. Okay, so now let's test it out. As you can see, the elements, when they move, they grow a little bit smaller, and they grow when they get in the screen. Apparently the chicken is not changing when I move it all the way here, so I'm going to add another keyframe to the chicken over here. So at the end, I want the chicken to grow back to 0.2 and then change the opacity to 40%. Let's test it out. And now, see, now the chicken appears on screen, it grows in. And all of these elements are doing the same. Pretty cool. And all of this is being controlled by the drivers, not by the timeline, but by the drivers, because I have a scrollable element, and now the drivers are controlling all the keyframes that I added depending on the X position of this draggable content, of this scrollable content. Okay, so now just to finish this, I'm going to add one action from here, and when I tap it, it goes all the way to this. And I'm going to do the same with this one. When I press go back, I'm going to say that when it taps, it goes back to here. So let's test it out. And obviously I cannot tap until I'm at the end, and I press it and it goes like that. And it creates that animation because some of the elements are called the same. So if I were to make this a little bit bigger, for example, and rotate it, then it will do this. Sorry. Go back, and then creates that. Pretty cool stuff. There you go. And yeah, that's it. So now we were able to use drivers and also the draggable contents when you create this a scrollable content, a draggable content that is controlled by paged horizontal scrolling. Then you will be able to start adding drivers to be able to control other elements depending on the X position of that dragging. Obviously, you can go a little bit crazier if you, for example, if I were to add vertical draggable, like for paged or scrolling to this element, then I will be able to, let's just test it out so you can see where to able to scroll. Then you will be able to add more drivers to it depending on the Y position of the element. But that's for you to test it out and go crazy with the drivers and also with the page scrolling.